Good evening, familia. This is Ray Collazo, your host of the simulcast of the Found in Translation talk show in Bomba Live, the virtual Puerto Rican celebration. Thank you so much for joining us. Found in Translation stacks truth about politics and today's hottest issues. And Bomba Live is the virtual Puerto Rican celebration. Not much else you have to say. Thank you so much for joining us as a vodcast, live streaming here on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, as well as a YouTube show and a podcast, anywhere you download a podcast. Thank you so much again for joining us here as we get ready for our July 4th holiday weekend, which begs the question, how free is this land for some of us? And to help us answer that question, amongst many titles, a proud Barnard College graduate, Zoe Colon. Zoe, welcome back to the show.
Hello, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Nice to see you.
It is always great to see you, Zoe. We had a lot of fun on the 13th, and we wanted to continue this party at the Balancia, between the serious topics that we like to discuss that are important, that we're schooling people on. You got to take notes. You watch a Found Translation. And Bomba Live, the Puerto Rican party got started. Let me ask you a question, Zoe. You grew up in the Bronx, and some would think, oh, wow, she grew up challenged childhood. There's all these, myths and the mystique of the Bronx. But I would imagine the summer, between all the Puerto Rican festivals and things happening in the Bronx, you stayed pretty busy as a young person.
Oh, absolutely. You had the block parties in your own hood. Then you had the major ones like the 116 Festival. Sometimes various streets would get together and do larger events. Of course, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, Orchard Beach on Sundays. Then after party, you know what I'm saying? After the formal performance, then you had all the dancers. Up until like 7 p.m. So, I love the fact that I grew up in New York, that I grew up in the Bronx and Condado La Salsa. I love to dance salsa still. And actually, it's something I really miss because you see a little bit less of it here in Orlando, surprisingly. I really miss it for sure.
Yeah, no. And as I shared on the show before, I would spend long weekends in the Bronx with my titis. Much respect to my dear titi Millie up in who's still rocking it in Castle Hill. And I just have great memories. They would have so many of their friends in these little apartments. And
the house parties were the best.
The house parties were incredible. And the thing is, how are they doing? These were some of the, as a generación, they were some of the greatest salsa dancers. And we're going to have a lot of salsa talk here on the show and a salsa performance later with the Muevete dance company. But I was like, no, and they would do the elaborate salsa dancing. It's like, the space-time continuum was unbelievable. Zoe, we're later on the show, we're going to hear from some great friends of ours in a challenging circumstance, some friends of ours that are involved in mobilizing Latino and Puerto Rican voters upstate New York that are dealing with some real serious issues, but are great leaders and are going to provide us not only an update what's happening there, the challenges they're facing, but a lot of hope because these women are taking a lot of great leadership. Our great friends, Mercedes Vazquez, and now continuing to be state Senate candidate, Hilda Rosario-Escher. We're going to hear from another big contributor on the show, Shirley Santos. She's going to school us on kind of a Puerto Rican language lesson. A gubernatorial candidate in Puerto Rico has kind of gotten himself in hot water and brought the discussion around lenguaje and how Puerto Rican language speaks to some of the racial undertones and racism in our culture. But we're going to have some great musical performances as well.
We're going to have Muevete, salsa dance company, and some Bomba de Luisa, Puerto Rico, which is going to be courtesy of Cultura Activa. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. But before we get to that, Zoe, our hearts and minds, our prayers, all our love. Unfortunately, it feels like every week we're doing this. There's some terrible tragedy happening to a person of color, whether it was this string of murders by the police of African Americans, George Floyd being Rashard Brooks being, I guess, the latest or amongst the latest. Breonna Taylor, still no one's been arrested in Louisville, Kentucky. Of course, Ahmaud Arbery and so many other cases. There are too many to name, unfortunately. The string of Latinos that have been killed under very mysterious circumstances out in California. In this latest case, which is already over 2 months old, infuriatingly enough, a woman that was in the U.S. military, Vanessa Guillen, disappeared a few months ago. Hardly anybody seemed to care. And it took public pressure by her family to just get anyone to pay attention, whether it was the police, the military, or the media. And it turns out in the last several hours, some remains, which appear to be her remains, have been found. And the main suspect committed suicide on the base. Zoe, I guess as we go into July 4th, I guess my question to you is, how free is this land for us? I mean, this is a very challenging time for activists who I know sort of, even some that aren't as engaged in activism and questioning our system, or sort of questioning our place in the society as we approach July 4th.
Absolutely. You have a young woman, who was 20 years old, who signed up to serve to protect this country. And ironically, having, reported sexual harassment and assault, for one reason or the other, that, it was unfounded, if you will, by the administration. And here we are. She was bludgeoned to death, the last that I saw, with a hammer. And, it was at the hands of someone she had reportedly already reported and also mentioned to her family. So, again, the irony, right? Like someone who signs up to be part of, a democracy and protecting, others, and you and I wasn't protected. And if you really think about, if you unpack this, it's, a Me Too situation. It's, a Latina, issue. Why wasn't this amplified more, earlier on? Sexual harassment in the workplace. This is, the military as yet another system of oppression for people of color, for women, for the LGBTQ community. So there's just so much to say about this case. And, I look forward to talking to Christine about it as well, because she has her organization, Love Shouldn't Hurt. And when people think of domestic violence, we often really don't pay attention to sexual harassment, sexual assault, right? And that comes in many forms and shapes and forms as well, right? Sexual harassment in the workplace, the passive aggressive, the microaggressions, and all these things that we kind of normalize as women, as men, as our community. And to think that perhaps in this person's mind and that perpetrator's mind, maybe a Latina life was expendable, and it's something that no one would care about. And so perhaps, that maybe allowed for more freedom, or, maybe it made him feel secure about what he was doing in some sense, because he didn't think this person would be protected. To the point about why we didn't hear more, I think a lot of folks in our community are really struggling with how to support the Black Lives Matter movement, but also, motivate, inspire people in our community to really think about racism. And we're going to talk about that a little later. And to really, highlight the issues in our own communities. And sometimes I think we struggle with how much we should and can do that without taking away from the Black Lives Matter movement, right?
Mm-hmm. Question about it.
Yeah, I've had friends call me. Actually, we had a conference call one night, just my girls from New York, and they were like, "We want to help, but we don't know how to approach this topic without feeling like we're stepping into a space." There's always this idea that you're going to take away from either that argument or that that movement if you start to highlight your own issues, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot of layers to this, so people wonder why does the Black community, or why not the Black community, I'm sorry, excuse me, why is there looting, and this is why there's looting, because when there's looting and the media starts to actually pay attention to the issues because you're looting or because there's mass protests, then things get done. That's why you have Stonewall Jackson, figures being, dismounted and whatever, and all these murals are being painted, and all of a sudden Fortune 500 companies are talking about Black Lives Matter. Like this is why, right? This is why people loot. And so I'm not insinuating, I'm not saying that we should do the same, but I think that we should be out mobilizing for our community and advocating for ours feverishly. Like we should be out on the front lines doing this. And so there's so many the Latino community, we use this pan-ethnic term, but there's so many different cultures and generations of people. And so sometimes it's a little challenging to get people together. But these are the issues, this is sexual harassment. This is a Latino issue. This is, women's rights issues. I mean, there's so many things to be said about this case. And so we'll see how this pans out. I think there's going to be limited, evidence, but they did find the body as is the last.
And they arrested an alleged female
female
conspirator.
who I think
So hopefully she'll have some information that can shed some light and provide the family some justice. I think you're right. And we talked about this last week on the show with Liza Monet Morales, and she's sort of engaging, as we are, sort of engaging with her event yesterday, Hispanicized sort of celebrity class in this conversation around how they should engage in Black Lives Matter and these discussions within the Latino community. And you're right, because Latino activists are really dealing with three levels. It's how do we support and show solidarity and partnership with the African-American community? Mm-hmm. How do we also highlight that we, without looking like we're trying to equate things, that we're also going through a lot of very similar issues, not only police brutality, this issue with this woman. I mean, this woman, what else does a Latina have to do than join the military, basically out of high school, and show her commitment to this country and deserve some much needed respect? The other part of it is, as we've been leading here, and I'm proud to say you've been a big part of this as well, is that, Zoe, that, to address, and we're going to talk about this in the next segment, to address racism within the Latino community, because it starts with us, because the reality is, let's keep it real. It's not a huge group, but it's a big enough group of Latinos and Puerto Ricans that have bought into the Trump nonsense in 2016. That's why we're in this position right now. Mm-hmm. And if we're not, and despite the horrific job he's done, I know you have a question for me on this. It's still not a done deal. This guy could win again. And look, and we know why. We know many of the reasons, but there's still going to be some Puerto Ricans and some Latinos that might vote for this guy. So that are going to vote for him. So we got to minimize that number. And part of this is addressing this issue right now and being, what are you really voting for here? Are you really voting for internalizing the racism that you've internalized in your life? And, so there's some deep issues that we have to confront. And I think we have to be transparent that we don't have all the answers, but at the same time, we have to be proactive in taking that leadership and taking those steps and making those statements. And the Vazquez family, we're with you 100%. I mean, what happened to her is horrific. And it speaks to the second-class citizenship battle that we're having here, because you could talk about, the people that they broke the rules with, first of all, applying for being a refugee is not illegal. And second of all, then how do you explain Puerto Rico, the ongoing lousy treatment? Now there's not even enough water on the island. I mean, it's an island and there's not enough water. I mean, think about that, right? Part of the United States. The treatment of us in the streets by the police, what happened is Vanessa, and by the way, she was the second Latino military person. There was a guy last summer that disappeared, and they just found his body not too far from where they found hers recently. So there's a lot of issues there. So I know, Zoe, you had a question about the political stuff that we're going to get to our first musical performance of the day.
Well, I think with what's happening right now in our country, it's mind-boggling that this administration would continue. That there's a possibility that this character that we have for President Trump can actually still win on blatant white supremacy, even with the death of George Floyd and the subsequent activism and, folks that had never really thought about racism, maybe finally turning an eye to it, even with everything that has happened and whatever progress has come out of it, what do you think? Do you think there's really a chance for this person to win?
Yeah, I think there's a shot. As crazy as that sounds. I think first of all, it's only because of the Electoral College. This guy's going to lose by 5, 6, 7 million votes. If you look at the heart, I don't know who that is, Bobby. My youngest, I don't know. Just put it down and we'll figure it out after the show.
Oh, I was talking about Trump. Like, we still don't know who he is. He's
holding up some sort of milk carton or something. He's like, what is this? I'm like, I don't say. I got some lights in front of me. I can't really see it too well. But no problem, Bob. So he's going to lose in that sense, but he also lost 2016 in that sense. So because of the Electoral College and because in the upper north, we have a lot of states that are overwhelmingly white, he still has a small chance. Maxwell, I just need a second, Poppy. Then I'm going to go to a music break and I'll answer your question.
Daddy duty's never over.
Yeah. Just give me a second, Max. Just give me a second.
Well, it'd be good for us in the future to talk about the Electoral College, right? Because I think some conversation about what's the use of,
to hold on to white power. I mean, is what it is, because it isn't democratic. There's no question about it. Look, part of me thinks like there's about a part of me really thinks he's going to get his ass whooped and it's going to be irrelevant. I mean, that's possible. The polls stay the same. Part of me thinks like inevitably, the economy can only get a little bit better. I mean, COVID is still here, but it's
right. Speaking on COVID, like he hasn't even performed when it comes to responding to COVID. He's irresponsible. Every single day you can hear how irresponsible he is. Yeah.
And that's why he's losing confidence with his senior base, because they're worried about dying. Forget the racism for a second. Right. But I think, the thing that, and this speaks to this next segment we're going to have with our friends from New York in a little bit, is that, the thing I worry about, to be honest with you, is voter suppression. This idea that he's going to have a lot of money to try to stain Biden and just some old fogey. There's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to be excited. They want him to be honest with you. And, there's room here for, corruption. I mean, let's be honest with you. You don't think there's election board supervisors that are Republicans in counties in Michigan and Pennsylvania that they wouldn't strong arm to cheat? I mean, so those are real issues we have to deal with.
This is why it's so hard to get Latinos out to vote, electoral college, when people, even just the average person, learns about the electoral college. Like, entonces, ¿para qué yo voy a votar? What's the point of me going to the polls, right? And now we have this push for vote by mail, which I know we're going to cover later. But, how can people really trust the system, right? And that's all we have right now with COVID. So it's a really tough election cycle, for sure, for Latinos and people of color in general.
It definitely is. But the one thing I do want to say, and I know we're going to lighten up the mood and get our first musical performance of the day here. Okay. But I want to be straight. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to say it 17 times before the election on the show. I'm on my live. Boricuas, if we want this Trump thing to end, we can do it ourselves. Just amongst our community in Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. If we mobilize our community just in those smaller group of states, our community can be one of the primary reasons that he goes away. So if we really want to do that, we want to end this nightmare, it's incumbent on us. We have the power. Everything is always saying correct. And the Florida voter thing is a mess. That system is a mess. I know the lines. I understand all that. But the reality is, what's the alternative? So we got to do what we can to organize ourselves and get this done. Zoe, I know this was one of your favorite performances in Bomba Live. I know a lot of people didn't watch all 10 and a half hours. So throughout the next several weeks, we're going to show some of the highlights, some of the great performances and commentators that were on the big show that we had last June 13th. You can check out, subscribe to the Bomba Live YouTube page to catch all 10 and a half hours. Yes. I know I've watched this several times. It's a lot of fun, including many great workshops and panels that Zoe led. So Zoe introduced this next, our first musical act of the evening. It's going to be a great dance performance from our friends.
Seguro que sí. So stay tuned. Check out Muevete Dance Company, who's bringing some salsa to Bomba Live.
Hosts Ray Velez, Martin Rodriguez, and Christy Robinson. Hey. There you go. Hi.
How are you? Good. Super excited.
Wonderful. Qué bien. So I know Muevete Dance Company just celebrated their 18-year anniversary, and now you have an amazing new studio. Tell us about it.
So it's located in the heart of Frankfurt, which is 2101 Orthodox Street. It's brand new. Yes, it's in Philadelphia. It's brand new. We're just now waiting for all of this to get over with the COVID-19, and so that we can share with everybody the love of dance.
Okay, wonderful. So ahora vamos a bailar Bomba Live Family, Muevete Dance Company. Yes.
So I present to you guys two of my dancers, Martin and Kristen. Muevete Dance Company.
Amazing! Que bello! I love it. Beautiful.
Good
job.
So
when can people reach you? What's your social media?
Social media, Muevete Dance Company on Instagram, Muevete page on Facebook. And you guys can contact me 215-278-0755. Again, 215-278-0755. My name is Ray Velez. I'm the director.
Thank you, Ray Velez, and the Muevete Dance Company. And now Shirley, we got Shirley Santos with us. Buenas noches, Shirley. ¿Cómo está?
Bien. ¿Y tú? ¿Cómo está todo el mundo?
Great to see you. I know you all enjoyed that show. I know you all enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. That was all jamming over here. Yes. Bailando al ritmo de la salsa.
en la cuarentena. You know, Florida.
I know.
We thought we were scotch-free, but we're not. So now we're locked down again.
Sure. Well, that's wishful thinking from Tallahassee. We have Shirley Santos with us, and I'll actually, I would think that our guest Hilda Rosario, maybe she's the best we have a lot of good salseras on the show today, but Hilda's quite a dancer as well. But I know Zoe's also.
She's a fashionista. Hilda always looks fashion model. I mean, seriously. So
icon. I am like the worst. I have the worst fashion sense of all times. My wife has to dress me, frankly, so I can like have matching socks. At least they're the same color. And I once told Hilda, I said, Hilda, you're the most fashionable person I know. She is a fashion icon. There's no question about it. Shirley, you're a big part of the show. You're back with us for this segment and for the rest of the show, because this is our Boricua News segment where we try to do in Bomba Live, give people an update what's going on in the island of Puerto Rico. And we have some primaries coming up there, so we don't know who all the gubernatorial candidates are yet. But one of the gubernatorial candidates, very dubiously, made a comment which sparked a conversation that we wanted to continue here on Bomba Live around how even within our language, how we talk about each other, the undertones of race exist in our community.
Absolutely. I mean, and it all started with some video that was posted. Apparently, he was speaking about his time working in New Orleans with some African-American brothers and sisters. And his exact words were, I have washed dishes without gloves with some little black people, lo que nosotros llamamos prietitos, that I did not even understand the English that they were speaking. And that's what he mentioned in the brief segment. Apparently, this has made it back into the media, and now he's been heavily criticized. And, I personally could not understand why he just did not apologize. I mean, if we're really trying to make a change, giving the circumstances and the times that we are in, why not take advantage of this opportunity to say, listen, back then, those words are not acceptable. They're not acceptable now, and I apologize. But that's not what happened.
I think he's doing what a lot of folks in the community do. Just to say, pero eso no es una palabra mala. Eso yo lo digo de cariño, negrito, negrita, right? And it's to minimize or romanticize the word negro or negra, which for a long time and still today is considered derogatory. And so you have groups like Colectivo Ile who are saying, no, yo soy negra. No me digas negrita, yo soy negra, ¿entiendes? So take that word, right? And empowering people through that, through that identity, which I think is really powerful. But I think the average person in our community, whether in Puerto Rico or not, still think that we have racism in our community. It's impossible. We don't talk about race. We don't see race. We don't see color. And that's just a term of endearment. And so it really minimizes the history of those terms and why they exist. And I think that's why he hasn't responded with an apology, because he probably really doesn't think there's anything wrong with it.
No, but they took it to the next level, because in his response, you saw, he actually did a radio interview on Radio Isla with Mr. Saniel Rivera, who's one of our great Afro-Puerto Rican journalists, who was put in a difficult position because he's an objective journalist, but he wanted to address this issue, so he had to kind of approach it kind of in a sensitive way. Beluisi doubled down and said, well, you know what? That's not a pejorative term, because I was called a prietito in my house. And, Pedro's a light-skinned guy, so I can imagine, what were the rest of the family, ghosts? So my point is that you're right, because Puerto Ricans often, every culture is a little different, because there's implications the way Puerto Ricans use the word moreno or morena. There's implications how we use negro or negra, then prieto, which to me was always kind of more the pejorative tone, generally. In Puerto Rican Spanish and Puerto Rican conversations, is that we play with these words. Sometimes we're using it to talk about a partner's looks. Right. So, I have uncles that would refer to their wives as negritas, even though they're not particularly black or what you would consider Afro-Boricuas. But then they'll turn around and use these words in a negative way, referring to other Puerto Ricans or African Americans. And I thought the fact that he used it referring to African Americans, not Black Puerto Ricans was very indicative, Shirley. So, Shirley, you're the Spanish teacher here, so break down for people how some of this language in Puerto Rican Spanish and culture gets played with back and forth.
Well, the thing is that it's. I think the excuse now is that it's part of our culture, and I think it's been normalized. This kind of language has been normalized, and Colectivo Ile is at the forefront fighting these kinds of things and language, trying to change the curriculum in school so their history, our history is included in the curriculum. But I mean, growing up, I remember a lot of phrases. Being a light-skinned Puerto Rican, I remember my grandfather telling me, "Vas a dañar la raza." If he saw me with anybody who was, a trigueñito or a darker shade of Puerto Rican, that's what he used to say to me. I know that if you have curly hair, dicen pelo malo. When they refer to sewer water or sewage water, whatever, they call it agua negras, So it's just embedded in a lot of things, in the music, in los chistes, and people need to start making a self-reflection. And I think the island is going through this, and all thanks to, unfortunately, the death of George Floyd, and how these voices now are being heard, and people are starting to sit and self-reflect. There's a lot of work to do. I think we have abolished slavery, but racism is alive and well, and it's very, very present in our culture. Little things that we have to start realizing that are not okay.
I think that the Ricky Renuncia movement, came out of, the calling out misogyny, right, and domestic violence and anti-LGBTQ comments, and and so I think that there's an awareness that's at least minimally, hopefully, leading to difficult conversations in the household. And I love that groups like Colectivo Ile and even some of the candidates that are running that are darker skinned women that are out there, saying, yes, I can lead this community, and, and also the work around the census, right? Claiming your race in the census, which is a lot of what people has been doing. I hope will at least ignite some conversations that need to happen, because it's not just in Puerto Rico, right? I mean, this happens here, it's everywhere. Right. Pero the fact that it's been romanticized, no, eso es de cariño. Yo le digo, like, my mom is very light skinned, like your color, and my dad used to call her negra. You know what I'm saying? And so it may not come with malice, right? Mm-hmm. We'll have to have, I think, difficult conversations within our families to explain why this might be not misinterpreted, but offensive to people, and why we need to change that.
Well, I think it's very important that we start listening to our brothers and sisters who feel that kind of language is, offensive, and that it's just a way to perpetuate racism. And if, we have to listen, and we have to respect, how they're feeling and how oppressed they feel. And, we have to make changes. As simple as that. We can't sit here and deal with fragility. Oh my goodness, I'm offended. We're beyond that, people. We're beyond that. We just got
to keep it real. And this gubernatorial race in Puerto Rico is very subtly, there's a lot of dynamics, right? So, but Luisi, who's, I don't like him, but he's not a dumb guy. I mean, he's a capable person, but he's in bed with Promesa Board. He's got a lot of issues. But my point is that he has in this interview I was watching on How to East Line, I encourage people to Google it from yesterday, is that he's a very arrogant guy, and he's running against a woman, the current governor, Wanda Vazquez, and he has this very tough guy. He's trying to intimidate her, there's a lot of subtle gender politics there with how he refers to his confidence in winning this election. He's going to, he's going to wipe the floor with, he's using a lot of derogatory language, talking about he's going to beat her, and not really respecting her as a legitimate candidate. And then there's a good chance if he were to win the nomination, he'll run against multiple women, from multiple parties, depending on how some of these primaries shake out in a few weeks. So I think there's a lot of issues there. And most of these people are not particularly darker skinned. So, we're not going to have a Afro Puerto Rican be the next governor one way or another, or even someone that would be considered a more typical looking Puerto Rican. So you're watching Bomba Live with Shirley Santos and Zoe Colon. Before we bring on our very special guest from upstate New York, part of the Puerto Rican diaspora in Rochester, New York, Zoe, you've got some, you always have the 411 on the I-4. So let people know about the Florida primaries and a few things you want to note about these important elections happening in Florida in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, so there's a huge need to push, our community. The deadline to register to vote for the primary is July 20th, which is 18 days away. To make changes to your current registration, and it's a closed primary state, right? So a lot of folks don't know that. If you just moved from the island, or even if you've never participated in the process and you're ready to, we've actually had people line up at the primary and then find out that they are not eligible to vote once they get to the poll, which is really, disillusioning, right? And it's because they didn't choose a party. And so a lot of the, I don't want to go on a rant, but a lot of the work that's done is nonpartisan. And a lot of times they don't take that position. They don't really put pressure on our community to choose a party, right? So it gets a little complex, right? It gets a little complicated because we have to tell people you're not going to be able to vote in the primary if you don't choose a party. So it doesn't mean that you have to tell people what party to pick, but you have to make people aware. And so with funding and how, C3s have to be really careful, there's a gap there. There's a real gap. And so our community, at least 2 years ago, was definitely on the higher end of the spectrum of choosing no party affiliation. And I have registered people personally who really believe that no party affiliation means independent. Right. And they don't realize what that means. Even if it says it there, they're thinking that, this is just a different ideology. Like I'm not going one thing or the other. Right. I'm tired of that bipartisanship. And so and then they also don't know what a closed primary state is. And so I'm very concerned not only about the primaries, but also the vote by mail. Right. So requesting the vote by mail and then having to, sign the form after you seal it, and the signature having to match. Entonces nosotros vamos a decir María Lice Hernández Strom, de Otero, and one day we'll use de Otero y el otro día no. Entonces la licencia tiene una cosa. This happens a lot. I'm doing
Tell me about it. We've dealt with it in Pennsylvania for a long time. Remember when the birth certificates expired and we were trying to get people there?
Now, but we use different names interchangeably a lot, and so I'm doing an English class registration, and one day it's Maria Lopez and the other day is 3 or 4 other names added to that. So we really need to do a lot of voter education in Florida to make sure that those vote by mail ballots are counted. Also, we need to increase the trust, right? Because we've heard a lot of nightmares when it comes to vote by mail, and some people just don't trust the system. And so we need to, generate some confidence in that system and have them understand that this is pretty much the only option. The other thing is that you can actually walk into go to the polls and just hand it in, right? So, and you can also drop it off during early voting. So there are different mechanisms. It's not only technically vote. And actually some of this I just learned myself. The average person just doesn't know all of these details, right? So, I'm worried about the primary. I'm worried that we're not pushing it enough, that folks don't really know that it's a closed primary, that a lot of Puerto Ricans are choosing no party affiliation, thinking that it's none of what they've been dealing with on the island, ni uno y el otro, right? And so there's a lot of work to be done, but we're gearing up. And, I was on a call the other day talking about, digital tools and how to reach the community that way and doing more voter education. So hopefully we'll be able to turn this population out.
No question about it. And much respect to our friends, Amy Ricardo and Hochi Cora, that were on the show recently, who are going to be on the ballot in August in Central Florida. We encourage people to come out to vote. I've always had an issue talking about Florida. In middle August, who wants to do anything in Florida? Much just go out to vote. So I've always thought the primary should be in the spring and a little more natural primary season. And I think that's just, Florida is a very voter suppression state, and we've been dealing with that legally in the ground organizing for a long time. And no wonder why we have some of these issues with the political process, like we have with your horrific, I said it, you don't have to say it, this horrific governor you have, doesn't want to pay people unemployment, is done a horrific job with COVID. And is, you know, I mean, he just cut a bunch of adult education funding in the budget. Just people, even Republicans thought it was like a typo. They were like, why'd you cut that money? These are adult learners. These are people that have special needs in the education system. So just a horrible governor, but that's why we have to keep organizing ourselves. Zoe, you're always going to keep us posted on those issues, and we'll probably continue that as we discuss voter suppression and those issues in upstate New York. We want to bring two great friends to the show that have some important information to share with us. We just had New York elections a few weeks ago. We had a lot of positive news that came out of New York, a couple of the congressional election results in New York City. Of course, our great friend Jessica Gonzalez Rojas won her seat for the state assembly, but there was another great friend of the show on the ballot that surely deserves a fair hearing here, what happened in Rochester. But let's have our friends Mercedes Vazquez and Hilda Rosario-Escher tell us about it. Mercedes, how are you?
Hi
And
there.
Hilda.
Hi, good evening.
how
Thanks
are
so much
you?
for having us.
It's great to see you.
Bienvenidas.
Hey, you know what, Hilda? No matter what happens, I'm going to call you Senator because you're my senator in upstate New York. No question
that's
about
right.
it. So we have two great friends to the show. Zoe and I have worked with Hilda for a long time. Mercedes is a great friend. And so why don't we start with you, Mercedes, because my part of the story started election day morning. I've been in touch with Hilda, you, of course, but also your family, Mercedes, your campaign team, to provide whatever guidance we could as the election evolved. But on election day, I was Googling, seeing what was going on, and I got a call early in the morning from Mercedes because she was having an issue that even her mother, who is one of the most dedicated civil rights activists in upstate New York, was having an issue voting for their candidate of preference. So, Mercedes, why don't we start with how the morning started with you for election day, then we'll go to Hilda for her perspective as a candidate.
Yeah, so, primaries was something that I think may just go down in history for me. Let's just start a couple days before. The Thursday before primaries, I actually called the Board of Election as just followed to my many calls because I wanted to serve as an interpreter to a high-rise. This is a high-rise in the heart of the Latino community and for decades was a poll site. So I wanted to serve as an interpreter. I actually volunteer at that building because there's a senior center in that building. And quickly learned that the poll site had changed. And reason given was COVID. So I was completely alarmed considering the fact that we were not made aware of the change. Many of the residents in that area, particularly the high-rise, didn't get any of the absentee ballot or information that would give them, access to absentee ballots. So it was scramble time. I took it upon myself to get a van to help transport many of the residents in that area that was about half a mile to a full mile away, crossing some very busy and dangerous intersections. We've learned, here it is, primary day at 6 a.m. where we're pulling all my seniors. I call them my colillo. And they were excited because they were going to have an opportunity to vote for their candidate, the only Latina in that ballot. So they were excited. They were like, yeah, they're going to do that.
Hilda's known in that community, and she's championed so much advocacy on behalf of the Puerto Rican Latino community. I've always said she's the informal mayor of Rochester.
Right.
Welcome, and thank you so much for being on the show. Te quiero mucho. So how did you feel when you first learned that your name was missing on some of those ballots?
Te quiero mucho también. Pues yo estaba esperando que algo iba a pasar y empezó desde que yo anuncié mi campaña. Primeramente, no encontraba un sitio para anunciar. Después de eso, tuve que pagar para rentar un sitio. Después de eso fue el empezar a recaudar fondos. Pues ya habían dicho a toda la gente que no contribuyeran pero yo como tengo muchas amistades siempre, pues me ayudaban. Después de eso fueron las peticiones y pues cuando yo sometí las peticiones, entonces ellos querían que yo no apareciera. Entonces tuvimos que mandar un memorándum, un memo diciéndole que la persona que no quería que yo estuviera en la papeleta no era parte de mi distrito y que eso era ilegal. Entonces, después de eso, vienen las primarias y anuncian que los sitios donde la gente hispana han votado por muchos años, están cerrados, que tienen que ir a otro sitio. Después de eso, pues ya yo sabía que esto estaba planeado todo.
Desde un principio esto fue una pesadilla, parece.
Eso era como subiendo una montaña, pero yo pues no, yo seguía.
Right.
Y nosotros hicimos encuestas y yo estaba al frente de todos los candidatos. Hicimos un debate y yo pues gané el debate.
Wow.
Pues entonces pues ellos cambiaron. Eso fue una confusión creada para que la gente de nosotros no pudiera votar. Entonces tengo muchos ejemplos de personas que fueron a votar y que le decían que ya ellos habían votado por papeleta en ausencia, cuando en realidad no habían votado.
Multiple voter suppression activities, if you will. It wasn't just your name not on the ballot, right? This was like voter suppression across the board in the Latino community, and specifically with your name not appearing. Which is...
y además de eso también yo creo que es racismo.
Okay, well, yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to get into that, but Rochester has a very interesting demographic, right? I think historically some areas were predominantly African American. There's been, I think, for a long time, generations of Puerto Ricans there, right? And me imagino que después de Maria, a lot more Puerto Ricans came.
Oh, yeah.
So, I see that here in Orlando and in other parts, and this has happened historically, as somewhat of a sense of displacement or someone losing power because there's a new growing majority, right? So how do you think that played into this?
Pero además de eso, esto ha sido, encontramos que esto estaba pasando por años. Lo que ellos hacían era que las latinas se registraban y entonces ellos eliminaban el partido. Entonces ellos no podían votar en ninguna primarias. Y esto nos lo ha dicho una persona que trabaja ahí. Ellos
Florida. Sorry.
Sí, y que ellos están tratando de votar. No ha sido de ahora, pero esto ahora porque yo era la candidata latina y ellos no quieren que nosotros pues tengamos una representación al nivel del estado.
Right.
Exacto.
Porque ellos lo que quieren es mantenernos en nuestro sitio. Que no haya representación.
Yeah.
Entonces, es bien triste lo que está pasando aquí. Y ahora, no hace mucho tuvimos una reunión y mira, tengo un coraje todavía que me pueden freír un huevo en mi cabeza porque había una señora que fue a votar, entonces todo lo que le hicieron es una vergüenza y pues eso me ha dado más todavía energía para pelear esto. No para yo ser la senadora, pero para que se reconozca lo que está pasando en esta comunidad. Y Mercedes y yo no vamos a parar hasta que toda la comunidad sepa lo que está pasando.
Exactly.
And
you're listening to.
And if I can
Absolutely, jump in, Mercedes.
My mother came from Puerto Rico in the mid 60s. In 1968, she wanted to vote, and she was instructed. Well, she had to take a test in English. Now, she just came from Puerto Rico, and in order for her to even register to vote, she had to take a test in English. Right off the bat, my mother said, "No, we've got to make a change." My mother went right up to the legislator to have that requirement changed, because many Puerto Ricans that were moving to upstate New York, and many of them were up here for agriculture. Some took on jobs.
Puerto Rican migrant farm workers. People don't know that history.
Absolutely.
I don't know if y'all know this. I had a distant cousin that was a migrant. Now we're talking when I was a baby. This is my dad's cousin in the late 70s that died, that was killed mysteriously in upstate New York during that time period. But anyway, so this history is very personal.
Absolutely. So early on, we knew what the value of voting was. My mother hasn't missed an election. She hasn't missed a primary. She hasn't missed a presidential. And she's embedded that value onto her children. That's why I took it very personal and took it upon myself. Like, my senior voters have to go out there and vote, and anyone that doesn't have transportation. But on the day of primaries, my mother went to this new site only to find that Hilda's name wasn't on there. And it was such a painful experience for her, and just to see her look of distress. But if you know my mother's a community activist. She said, aquí hay algo mal. Ustedes me van a buscar la papeleta que dice Hilda Rosario, o vamos a hacer un show aquí. So my mother demanded a ballot. She said, no, this is the right district. And they, everyone there was like, no, she's not in this district. Mind you, this is my fifth van full of folks that I've taken to this poll site. And many of these folks, because I wasn't able to go into there because there was an issue with a translator, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But many were telling me, yo como no vi el nombre de Hilda en la papeleta. And I said, pero ¿cómo puede ser? And it took my mother having to go there. Ella dice, tú tienes que entrar aquí. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness. I quickly called Hilda. I quickly called the Board of Elections.
Right? Like, who would think to question that a name is not on a ballot? You would think the government has it together. So, I must be mistaken. I guess she's not running in my district. How many people, or a senior, or someone who's just, arrived from Puerto Rico, like, they're not going to question the system. It takes.
Well, they'll ask. They were very adamant that Hilda wasn't part of that district. We were getting into a shouting match.
Wow.
No, she is part of that. And our seniors no se van a poner con eso. They're like,
right.
They were disappointed. Right. And all of them had that look of just distress, like they're tired. And it really took several. I got on the phone with the Board of Elections. I called them at 12, and I got a text message at 7 o'clock saying, I'm interested in hearing a little bit about this. I was like, who is this? And it was the acting commissioner, or what is it, the interim commissioner for the Democratic Party, I guess, for the Board of Election. And I said, I can't believe that you're texting me at 7 o'clock, just 2 hours shy of our polls changing, of our polls closing. We have a very, very serious problem here. And, it was minimized. So it's only 20 votes. It was only, now it's down to 2 votes that it impacted, but yet every count matters. So they continue to minimize the fact that we were, our rights were violated. My mother's right was violated. My mother
absolutely. This is a democracy.
Furious because she felt her rights were violated. She wanted to vote for one person, and it was Hilda.
And think about, and she's your mother's been working on this as a born and raised U.S. American citizen for 52 years, fighting for the rights of people who just happen to, be U.S. citizens that maybe have a native language that isn't English, and are people of color that deal with this issue. And, Hilda, and first of all, lo siento, I see the pain and the emotion, not because, and let's be straight up about it. Hilda don't need this headache. This would be more work for Hilda. Hilda should be retiring and moving to PR and relaxing to enjoy the rest of her life.
You got it.
She doesn't need this. This isn't like an ego thing for Hilda. This is about the commitment she has, not only for the Puerto Rican Latino community, but for the community of upstate New York. This woman could have moved to Florida decades ago and lived a much nicer lifestyle day to day. Let's keep it real. So, but she has that compromiso with our community. But and Hilda, unfortunately, we share this in common because many years ago when I ran for the State House of Pennsylvania, a very similar thing happened to me. And that was, urban Democrats that were suppressing Latino voters because our numbers are growing, and the new generation of leadership that we developed intimidates them. And some are white, and some are black, and some are, and most of them are Democrats in this context. So let's keep it real. Right. So, these are issues that we've been dealing with, particularly in our urban northern cities. I don't have to tell Zoe about the Bronx stuff in New York. And, we're just finally making some progress in these last few years there. But so this is very personal. Hilda, what's your message? Let me ask you this question. I want Shirley to ask you the question on your message. But what do we do from here? What is the next step now? I know.
See, you've been working in the community. You have proven yourself. I don't think anybody's going to doubt that this is not about you. You have a track record of fighting for people's rights. So you go ahead and, if you have the energy and you're all fired up, yes, I would say, please, we need people like you to champion these causes in our community, because if you don't do it, guess what? It's going to be very hard to find someone else to do it. So I think you've already proven that you're really about the community. You don't have to worry about people thinking that you're trying to do this because you are a story.
That's right.
No, people that know Hilda, they know that that's not true. So I don't know if I just wanted to encourage you because we know it's not about you. It's about the community, and you have shown that.
Y yo también quiero unirme a ese sentimiento. Lamento mucho que ustedes hayan pasado por esto, pero a la misma vez agradezco que ustedes estén continuando con esta lucha porque es tan necesaria. Y pues no queremos que esto siga sucediendo, es una injusticia, y si nosotros no levantamos la voz, ¿quién lo va a hacer por nosotros?
Así es.
Y yo quería pues que Hilda, tú pudieras compartir un mensaje con los puertorriqueños que están en sintonía, o con todos los latinos que están en sintonía, acerca de la importancia del liderazgo y de la perseverancia.
To Hilda's point, we're organizing here in Rochester. There's a large Latino population, as you mentioned. I think that we know the value that Hilda brings to the table. It's unfortunate that's happened, but it's not going to be we're not going to be held back because of what happened. We're going to use that as a catalyst to continue this. This fight is bigger now than Hilda. This fight is about
That's right.
Making sure that the Board of Election here, which I mean, just to give you some history here, we have a new Republican commissioner, and then we have an interim Democratic commissioner that came in with controversy as it is. There's been some systematic breakdown that's happening against Latinos that we can't ignore. And again, they'll chalk it up to a mistake and COVID. But if you look at the location that we put our seniors in, it was dangerous. It was half the size. Most weren't using protective gear. There was no oversight to ensure that we were COVID compliant. It was just a complete and utter disaster. So there is a grassroots effort that's happening. Personally, I'm asking for the resignation of both commissioners. And we're going to continue to mobilize, making sure that everyone understands the value of the vote, getting folks to register to vote for the fall. Because that is a very important election. Unfortunately, for Hilda right now, if she didn't make the primaries, there's not going to be an election for her. So we are, again, going to use the fact that this has happened and with her guidance and with other Latinos that are here in Rochester, we're going to step up to the plate and say, we're done. Enough is enough.
Absolutely. And you've been listening to Mercedes Vazquez Simmons, a great community activist and entrepreneur. We're going to get into some of her business exploits in a second, one of her great passions. And for my money, one of the great leaders we have in the Puerto Rican Latino community, Doña Hilda Rosario-Escher, who was a state Senate candidate, still a state Senate candidate as the legal process. I think we had some Hilda, if you're watching, just log back in. It's like a TV. Sometimes you have to turn it off and on. So hopefully we'll get to Hilda back for her closing comments. And if anybody can text her, just
by the way, I call Hilda the Latina Jackie Onassis.
Yo,
She has got class from when she wakes up. I was like, do you sleep?
No.
Do you wake up like this looking so gorgeous?
The fashion game is unbelievable.
Yes.
She's a class act. Great family as well. Her children are great business people and supporters of her, and just a great partnership. So Hilda's getting her stuff together. But as we got to lighten it up a little bit, and I wanted to get some commentary from Mercedes. Speaking of fashion, so one of Mercedes, I don't know if Shirley, viewers, Zoe know this, great businesswoman, but she is a boxing promoter.
That's right. That's right.
So she is a boxing promoter, Pretty Girl Promotion. She does one of her great expertise is supporting women boxers, especially these Puerto Rican women boxers. Puerto Rican women are a big part of the Puerto Rico, boxing in general, with the women's boxing scene. And I know you're going to get into MMA as that evolves in New York State. But we've had a great week, and we're actually continuing it tonight. Later today, one of the great Puerto Rican boxers, Wepa, is going for his third belt in about an hour after this. You can check that on ESPN. But on Tuesday,
I'm looking at the time.
I was texting him and said this because there was two young up-and-coming Puerto Rican boxers on ESPN. John Bausa won his bout, and a rising star, born in Aguadilla, but Zoe lives in the Bronx now. A young guy named Josue. What's Josue's last name? Anyway, it's on the screen. So anyway, I'm having a brain fart all of a sudden. But anyway, Josue comes out, and there's a whole drama because they're in Vegas, and you had to stay in on your floor in the hotel, or you couldn't be a part of the fight. His dad goes downstairs to get a drink or something and forgot to put his mask on, so they wouldn't let him be in the corner. So he's crying before the fight. His dad wasn't able to help him, so he's going through all these emotions, and then he comes out like this. So we're gonna be off screen, but Mateo, people will still hear you. So you need to give your commentary on how Josue came out in this for his fight yesterday.
It was classic. Yeah, it was a Camacho style entrance for sure.
Josue Vargas. So talk to me, Mercedes, about this look.
First and foremost, Camacho is so near and dear to my heart. Father, son, and the rest of the Camacho family. So I was thrilled to see a tribute to Camacho. And if I could just say something about boxing, boxing took a major pause around the world. So the mere fact that we're having events is a big thing. We were worried because boxing was on the decline because of the popularity of MMA. With this, we thought, boy, this could potentially be the demise of boxing as we know it. We're fortunate that the states opened up, Florida being one of them, and I believe Vegas. So the larger promoters, like the Bob Arums, are able to put on those boxing events, which we're able to see. But as you can see, they're audienceless. And there are some serious precautions. Fighters have to go in. They have to be take the COVID test. They have to be on premise, I believe, maybe a week or two before the event. And they have to comply with many of the guidelines that the state puts on, the state commission. New York, unfortunately, we're not there yet. In fact, we don't even have boxing gyms open in New York. So fighters, we encourage fighters just to stay active in their homes, use outdoor facilities to make sure that they're still doing cardio. But it's been very difficult. And I think New York may be one of the later states. We're right now in upstate New York, we're in phase 4, but gyms were not included in that phase 4. So I don't think we'll see any shows this quarter, maybe fourth quarter, we'll see some shows. And, New York has some of the New York is the capital of boxing. So we have to have
Hall of Fame, not too far. I've been there. My brother went to Syracuse, so I have some understanding of that. Of course, visited y'all many times. Josue Vargas, young prospect to watch, Zoe. Bronx guy. This kid's got some swag. He's very athletic. I was texting with Mercedes because giving us that analysis for the fight last night. And, of course, Puerto Ricans have a great tradition in boxing. Shirley, let's re-ask Hilda Rosario-Escher, who's returned to us for our final comments.
Definitivamente, Hilda, yo estaba diciendo que lamento que pues esto te haya pasado, pero también estoy muy agradecida que sigas con esta lucha. Y yo creo que es bien importante que en esta noche, ¿qué mensaje tú le tienes para todos los puertorriqueños que están escuchando y los latinos que están escuchando?
Es muy, muy importante que nosotros nos registremos para votar. porque el voto es el poder que tenemos. Si tú no votas y si no te registras, pues entonces no tienes ningún poder. Y eso es lo que están tratando de hacer, que nosotros, porque si no votamos, pues entonces los políticos no nos ponen atención, porque no somos importantes. Yo quiero exaltarle a ustedes que tienen que registrarse para votar, porque si no, los recursos no vienen a nuestras comunidades y no nos importan. Nadie nos pone atención. Es su voto.
Así es.
Exactly. That's a wonderful way to end that segment. Hilda Rosario-Escher, we're with you. Please keep us posted on your legal battle and the ongoing advocacy you're going to do on behalf of the Puerto Rican Latino community and really all people in Rochester. This woman, through her work in housing, healthcare, human services, everything. Education, she has helped countless amount of people in upstate New York. Her leadership is known throughout the state, throughout the Puerto Rican diaspora, throughout the Latino community around the country. So we're going to support you and whatever your next steps are, 1,000%. Mercedes, you know how we roll. You're a great activist. Manu un saludo. Your wonderful mother. She's one of our favorites to follow. She's a great follow on social media that you chronicle your relationship with her. It's so beautiful to watch that. And, yeah, absolutely.
Y ella le encanta el reggaetón.
Yeah, ella tremenda ella. We gotta exchange notes on the music. I know she's big on ella está en todo, like my mother says. She's into all of it. So thank you so much. I want to wrap up the show with Shirley and Zoe for a moment, but I really appreciate our friends from Upstate New York. Zoe, part of you I know is infuriated and really upset about this. But then the other part is the resolve that these strong women have to continue to fight for our community.
I thought that was an easy win. I mean, just with her visibility in the community, I think she was the CEO of Ibero for at least 30 years. I believe.
Probably the founder.
Her heart is really in it. I got to know her a little bit personally, and I just know her heart is in it. I mean, she's been doing right by that community and all of the community, not just the Latino community, for such a long time. I didn't understand how that could even happen, right?
It's supposed to be a democracy, the United States, which is quickly crumbling, which is really scary. Really scary.
Like, what do you mean, right? And that's why I made the comment that I don't think the average person thinks that it's even possible for something like this to happen, because it shouldn't be, And so I hope that, I know she's hurt and angry, but I hope that turns into that, what she needs to continue to fight, because it's important. It's important that she fights that fight. If she doesn't do it, who's going to do it, right? To Shirley's point, who's going to take this on better than someone who's been impacted by it? And I think people know her heart, and they know that it's not about the fact that she didn't move it to the next, to the next election, but that this is unfair and this is unjust for our community. And it wasn't just about the ballot. It was about people going everything
else. Oh yeah, moving the location, all the funny business, and they did that to seniors. What's easier for them to go down the right there in the voting booths in the lobby? What's easier than that for them?
Do you think the average person thinks about where the poll locations are? No. But when you start analyzing it, you're like, why did they close the polls right next to that university or right next to that community center? In that community? Only people that are really, in the trenches, really thinking about these things, really notice that. The average person doesn't know that. So somebody needs to highlight those things.
And there's been voter and minority community voter suppression going on with the excuse of COVID all over the country. Think about that young man in Kentucky, Mr. Booker. He would have won that primary if all the polling places had been where they were normally supposed to be. Didn't you see those people banging on the door at the convention center trying to get in to vote in Louisville, Kentucky? And it's happened in Texas. It's countless places throughout the country where minority voters have been disenfranchised. Hopefully it won't happen in Florida in the primary, but we'll see.
It happens to people with licenses from Puerto Rico. Yes. So the poll workers are often not Hispanic. Let's just say that. And I actually went with my aunt who had just moved from Puerto Rico, and they were like, no, she can't use the port. And I was like, yes, she can. She can absolutely use the license from Puerto Rico. Yes, she can. And so I had to advocate for her. But you know how many people probably went to that poll with a license from Puerto Rico? ¿Y quién? Entonces, if you're, again, newly arrived, you're like, oh, okay, yo creía que sí, pues se van como dicen, con el rabito entre las patas, and they go home not knowing that somebody just, suppress their right to vote.
That's right.
So it's happening, and I'm glad that upstate we're gonna have someone fighting for us.
Absolutely, and I want to. This is incumbent on, because at this point, Hilda's right. It isn't about her, but that means the other leadership in that community have to step it up. It just can't be Mercedes. It happens. I see it all the time in our work. It's always the same 3 or 4 people doing everything, and it's like we got 50,000 Latino voters in that community. They need to step it up, organize, support her. They can't be doing everything. Register people to vote. We still got elections coming up, obviously, in the fall. And they need to be there and hold that Board of Elections accountable and call for their resignation. I mean, to blatantly suppress people to vote and then nothing's going to happen to them. They have to hold these. Somebody should go to prison for that. Somebody should be indicted for that. That's criminal to do that to voters.
Absolutely. And I just want to say that I think it's a shame que a estas alturas we have to be this vigilant, because they're doing everything in their power to keep us down. I mean, a lot of us start, getting comfortable thinking, maybe things are changing. And then things like this happen and you're like, oh my goodness, how can this be happening? Well, we moving forward, we're going to have esa malicia, even though, you don't want to have it, but it's the only way to guarantee that things are done right and that things are done fair.
And this is where, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues for their final thoughts on the show. And then Shirley's going to introduce our musical performance to wrap the show up. But this is where our friends in the legal community have to step it up, because, these are legal battles. We have to have our voter protection and our legal stuff in check so that our legal community friends, our Puerto Rican Latino lawyers, can go to the Board of Elections, say, we know the tricks before the election, say, these are the tricks we're going to be looking for. This is our federal, we've already alerted the federal agents that you do this kind of stuff. We're going to have video cameras. We're going to have lawyers at every place. And these are the things we're going to be looking out for to try to intimidate these people on our end to be like, to know our rights. And I don't know all the dynamics happen in Rochester, but that legal piece and our friends in the legal community have to be there to do a lot of the preventative, threatening these people on the front end to be like, we're going to be watching you at every polling place and train our workers to look out for these things. Zoe, any final shout outs or thoughts? I know you're excited for some of the other shows we're planning as we get closer to election day, and just a lot of fun stuff we're going to be doing here in Bomba Live.
I look forward to discussing the upcoming elections and the importance of advocating in our community for people to get out the vote, informing our community, voter education, and we need to keep talking about sexual harassment and issues that impact our community beyond politics, like we did at the beginning of the show. And so I'm just happy to be part of it. And, there's just so much, happening, like what Shirley is saying is like, a esta altura, you don't think that you should be even dealing with these issues, right?
Absolutely.
But this is a historic time, I think, for communities of color, and so we gotta keep that momentum going, to talk about things that impact all of us. So
no question. And after the primaries in Puerto Rico, the invitations will be out. We are inviting all of the major candidates for governor of Puerto Rico to come on the show and talk to the diaspora and talk to the people in Puerto Rico about your positions. We need to learn and get involved, because we're going to get calls, from our cousins on the island, and we're going to hear information and want to be accurate about the future of the island, because whether it's the governor or down ballot, we obviously know we need a cleansing of political players here on the island. And so people need to be held accountable with their positions, because even though the Promesa board really chokes a lot of their leadership, it's very important that they help reestablish the ethical base and the democracy of the island of Puerto Rico, so to be part of the future of our diaspora. And, all the candidates, whether they're local, Congressman Soto, we love to have on the show from Central Florida, AOC, of course, all the Gutierrez, all the players that are going to be part of the elections in November. We want to hear their guidance as well as the activist class. Zoe, thank you very much for being on the show. Shirley, you're going to take us out, because this was a group, as the director of Puerto Rico-based talent from Bomba Live, you had the honor of working with these folks that brought so much to Bomba Live, and we're going to take them out. This is actually a bonus cut. This is a part of the performance that, because of time, wasn't able to be on the regular Bomba Live. So you're going to see an extra performance from some great friends of part of the Bomba Live family. That's right.
Así que, without further ado, here is Cultura Activa.
Have a great evening, everyone, and subscribe to the Bomba Live YouTube channel. Follow us, Found Translation, Bomba Live social media. Thank you, Zoe, Mercedes, Hilda, and, of course, Shirley Santos. Have a great night.
Esperamos que les hayan gustado estas alternativas y no olvides seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales, en Instagram como Cultura Activa PR y en Facebook como GCL Foundation. Recuerda que nosotros somos Cultura Activa PR.